They say a mother's love knows no limits. I worked 2 jobs just to keep my daughter's dream alive. Ballet was her world. My husband said he was starting a business, but something never felt right. Then one rainy afternoon, I saw something outside her dance studio that stopped me cold. What I discovered on that polished ballet floor changed everything. Every morning started before dawn. I'd be up by 500 a.m., slipping out of bed carefully so I wouldn't wake my husband Mark or our daughter Lily. I'd quietly put on my grocery store uniform, tie my hair back, and pack a peanut butter sandwich for lunch. 6. I was at the store ringing up items and making small talk with early shoppers. From the outside, my life might have looked mundane, maybe even exhausting, and it was. But I had a purpose. Every shift I worked meant a little more toward Lily's ballet tuition, toward her shoes that wore out faster than I could replace them, and toward the leotards she adored in pink and lilac. She loved dancing more than anything. I loved her more than everything. My second job started in the late afternoon. I delivered for a local courier company, packages, groceries, sometimes flowers. It didn't matter. As long as it paid. I didn't rest much, and I definitely didn't complain. There was something fulfilling about knowing that my hard work was building a better world. For Lily, Mark didn't work. At least not in the traditional sense. He was always talking about launching a startup, something about a fitness app, or an AI chatbot depending on the week. He called himself an entrepreneur, but mostly he scrolled through his phone and sat in front of a laptop that never seemed to move from the same open tab. I didn't nag him. I figured he'd come around. I had more important things to focus on. Despite my packed schedule, I tried to be present for Lily. I'd sometimes swing by her dance class, just to catch a glimpse of her through the studio window. Watching her twirl with that big, goofy grin on her face made everything worth it. Even when my feet ached and my eyelids drooped, I'd stay just for a minute longer, hiding behind the tinted glass, hoping she'd see me and smile. She always did, that smile. It was everything. It made me believe that if I just kept pushing, kept sacrificing, we'd all be okay. We'd find our way to the life we dreamed of. Mark would figure himself out. I'd work my way to a better-paying job, and Lily would become the ballerina she always talked about. But life has a cruel way of testing how much you're willing to give before it gives anything back. It was a Thursday. Rain poured non-stop, all afternoon. I was doing deliveries near the studio and decided to stop by just a few minutes, just to see Lily dance. I pulled up to the curb and saw something strange. Mark was there. I froze. He stood just outside the entrance, smiling and chatting with a woman I didn't recognize. She was well-dressed, elegant in a way I hadn't felt in years. They looked comfortable, familiar. The way she touched his arm as she laughed made my stomach turn. But it wasn't until Lily came running out the door and wrapped her arms around the woman that I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. They looked like a family. My family. I ducked behind the van. My breath came short and shallow. I wanted to burst in and demand answers. But I didn't. I waited until they went inside, then drove off in silence, the windshield wipers beating a rhythm that matched the dull throb in my chest. That night, I didn't mention anything. I watched Mark from across the room sitting on the couch, phone in hand, pretending like nothing happened. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the woman was a business partner. Maybe she was just being nice. Maybe I was just tired and seeing things through the wrong lens. A week later, I found the courage to find out the truth. I arranged my shifts so I could pick Lily up from ballet. I told Mark. I had a late delivery. He didn't ask questions. He rarely did. The studio smelled of wood and resin classical music, echoed through the halls. I spotted Lily right away laughing with that same woman. They were sitting on the floor, stretching and chatting like they did this every week. Lily looked up, saw me, and that's when everything changed. "Mommy!" she shouted. "Not to me!" She ran straight into the woman's arms. I froze. Time stopped. My daughter had called another woman. "Mommy!" The woman looked up startled and smiled politely. "You must be Lily's mother." "I'm Sarah," she said, standing to shake my hand. I couldn't respond. My mouth went dry. My heart broke. In real time. Mark wasn't there. He'd left this part to unfold without him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply walked over to Lily, knelt down and said gently, "It's time to go, sweetie." On the walk home, I held her hand tightly. She asked questions, but I told her we'd talk later, teased. That night after she was asleep, I confronted Mark. He admitted everything. He and Sarah had been seeing each other for months. She was someone he met at a startup conference. He liked her energy. She understood him. He said I was too busy, too tired, too focused on Lily. He didn't say it with malice. Just detachment. Like it wasn't betrayal. Just an unfortunate byproduct of life. I asked him why Lily called her mommy. He said she spends time with her on weekends when I take her to ballet. It just happened. Like it just happened that my child thought someone else was her mother. I left the next morning. No shouting, in no drama. Just packed a bag, gathered Lily's things, and walked out the door. I found a small apartment through a friend. I arranged for Lily to transfer to a different studio. It wasn't as fancy, but the teachers were kind, and the mirrors still shimmered in the same way when she danced. I kept both jobs. It was hard, harder than ever. But for the first time in a long while, I felt light. Because I wasn't carrying someone else's lies on my back. Because Lily now knew that the woman picking her up, staying up late to sew her recital costume, and holding her after nightmares was not someone who just happened. It was her real mother. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need closure. I just needed a future that didn't include deception. And I was going to build that future one. Delivery. One shift. One plie at a time. The hardest part wasn't leaving, it was waking up the next morning and realizing I had to start everything over from scratch, with a daughter to raise on my own, a broken heart I didn't have time to fix, and a world that suddenly felt too quiet. I still worked 2 jobs. There was no magic solution, no sudden miracle. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just working to survive anymore. I was building something entirely my own, a home, a rhythm, a sense of peace that didn't depend on anyone else's decisions. Lily adjusted better than I expected. Kids have a resilience we often underestimate. She asked about her dad, and I told her the truth, just enough for her age, Daddy. And I decided to live in different homes. But I love you more than anything, and I always will. She seemed to accept that, at least for now. Sometimes she'd bring up Sarah. "Is it okay if I still like her?" she whispered one night. My heart ached, but I nodded. "You can love anyone who's kind to you, sweetheart. That doesn't change how much I love you." There were days I cried in the bathroom, muffling the sound with a towel. Nights, when the silence screamed louder than any fight ever could, I missed having someone to share responsibilities with, to vent to fall asleep next to, even if that person had long since stopped being that partner. But I didn't miss the lies. I didn't miss doubting myself. I didn't miss the quiet erosion of my dignity. A few weeks after the move, Lily's new ballet class held an open session. Parents were invited to sit in and observe. I almost didn't go. I was exhausted after a long delivery route, and I hadn't showered. But something told me I needed to be there. Not just for Lily, but for me. I sat quietly in the corner of the studio, watching her stretch practice her turns, and beam with joy. Something about that space, the familiar piano music, the rows of tiny pink shoes lined up at the edge of the room. It felt like coming home to a part of myself I had buried. I realized I hadn't just been working to support Lily's dream. Somewhere along the way, her dream had become mine too. It reminded me that beauty could still exist even in exhaustion, that grace could still be found even when everything else felt messy. It also forced me to confront something I hadn't yet said out loud. I had been surviving, not living. And I deserved more. Not in a grand movie ending kind of way, but in the small, steady kind. A warm kitchen, a quiet laugh, a night's sleep. Free from suspicion, I didn't know how to find that yet, but I knew I was ready to try. I started journaling again. Just a few lines each night. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I wrote down everything. Frustrations, small wins, things I was grateful for. The act of writing became a release, a way to anchor myself when the world felt unstable. Some nights I'd reread what I wrote and surprise myself. I wasn't weak. I wasn't a victim. I had taken control when everything was falling apart, and I was still here at work. Things began to shift too. My manager at the grocery store noticed my consistency and offered me more hours, and eventually a chance to train as a shift supervisor. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. A step, a possibility. One evening after work, I stayed late to clean up an aisle. A woman approached me and said, "You always look so focused. My daughter just started working here. Part-time. I hope she learns from people like you." It was such a simple comment, but I held on to it for days. I mattered. I made a difference even in small, invisible ways, as weeks turned into months. I stopped checking Mark's social media. I stopped wondering what he and Sarah were doing. I let go of the version of him I had tried to believe in, the one who might turn things around, who might suddenly become the man I needed him to be. That man didn't exist. Maybe he never had. Instead, I started thinking about the kind of woman I wanted to become. Not just for Lily, but for me. I joined a weekend community group for single mothers, just once a month. The first time I went, I almost backed out. I didn't want to tell my story again. I didn't want pity. But I went anyway. And I'm glad I did. Sitting in a circle with other women who had been through betrayal, heartbreak, and survival. It reminded me that I wasn't alone. That strength comes in numbers. That healing isn't linear, but it is possible. Lily started calling our new apartment our happy home. She decorated her room with ballet posters and stickers. On weekends, we'd make pancakes and dance in the living room. To old music, she said I had silly moves, and I said that was part of my charm. One Saturday afternoon, she turned to me and asked, "Are you happy now, Mommy?" It caught me off guard. I paused before answering, really thinking about it. "I'm getting there," I said. "Every day a little more." And it was true. Happiness didn't look like I thought it would. It wasn't picture perfect. It was chipped coffee mugs and early alarms, last-minute grocery runs and overdue laundry. But it was ours. And it was real. There are still moments when the past creeps in. A song, a smell, a sudden memory of a time when I believed things were different. But instead of letting those moments break me, I use them to remind myself of how far I've come. I'm not the same woman who stood outside that dance studio in the rain, heart pounding, trying to explain away what she saw with her own eyes. That woman was scared, unsure. holding on too tightly to something already gone. I'm stronger now. Not because I chose this path, but because I kept walking it, even when it hurt. I don't know what the future holds. I don't have a perfect plan, but I do know this. I'll keep showing up. For Lily. For myself. For the life we're creating together. One honest, hopeful step at a time. It had been nearly a year since we moved out, and while the pain of betrayal had softened, it hadn't disappeared. It lingered like a faint scar, no longer bleeding, but still sensitive when touched. Life had settled into something resembling normal. Early mornings, grocery store shifts, delivery routes, ballet classes, late-night dinners, homework, bedtime stories. But beneath that new rhythm, something quietly stirred. Something like hope. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle. A small voice inside whispering, "Maybe there's more." One afternoon, Lily came home clutching a brightly colored flyer in her little hands. Her eyes sparkled the way they used to. "When she danced for the first time in front of a mirror, Mommy," she said. "My teacher picked me to audition for the regional ballet showcase." I froze. This wasn't just a school recital or a neighborhood performance. The regional showcase was a big deal, an audition, only event where top dance schools scouted for young talent. It was the kind of opportunity that could change Lily's path completely. "That's amazing, baby," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. Inside my mind was already racing costumes, extra classes, transportation, time off work. How was I going to manage all of that? She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "Do you think I can do it?" I pulled her close. "I don't just think you were made for this," and I meant it in the following weeks. Everything shifted. Our small apartment became filled with classical music and stretching routines. I rearranged my work schedule to make sure I could get Lily to extra practices. I skipped lunch to save a few more dollars for shoes. I even learned how to sew ribbons onto her new point shoes, stabbing my fingers more than once. But proud of every stitch, Lily worked hard. She was determined, focused, and at times overwhelmed. There were nights. She came home in tears, convinced she wasn't good enough. I'd sit on the floor with her holding her hand, reminding her that perfection wasn't the goal. Passion was. But the pressure affected me too. The more I gave to support her, the more I felt something inside me begin to hollow. I hadn't done anything just for myself in what felt like forever. One night after Lily went to bed, I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at my reflection in the window. I didn't even recognize the woman looking back. She was tired, yes, but also faded. That weekend I went for a walk while Lily was at rehearsal. I wandered into a small bookstore cafe. I'd passed 100 times but never entered. Something drew me in. The scent of coffee, the quiet hum of people reading the warm light. It all felt like stepping into another version of my life. One where I wasn't just surviving. A woman at the back table smiled and waved me over. I blinked in confusion until I realized it was Marie. One of the mothers from the support group I had attended months ago thought, "That was you," she said. "Come sit with me." We talked for hours about kids, about books, about fear, about starting over. She told me about the online classes. She'd been taking creative writing, photography, art history, just little things that make me feel like me. Again, she said. That conversation stuck with me. The next day I searched for free local courses. I found a Saturday morning writing group at the community center. It wasn't fancy, just a circle of folding chairs and notebooks. But the first time I put pen to paper and started writing, not journaling, but really writing it, felt like something in me clicked back into place. I began writing every morning before work, just for 15 minutes. Stories about my childhood, about motherhood, about the rain. It wasn't about being good. It was about being alive. Meanwhile, Lily's audition day crept closer. Her confidence wavered as it approached. She practiced obsessively. I caught her dancing alone in her room. Late at night, her face set with determination, one morning, I found a sticky note on the bathroom mirror. It said, "I want to make you proud." My chest tightened. She didn't have to. She already had. Then came the day of the audition. We woke up early, packed her dance bag, and drove to the venue. In near silence. I held her hand, the whole ride there, praying silently that she wouldn't crumble under the pressure. The room was filled with dancers in pristine outfits, and parents in tailored coats. I felt out of place in my worn sneakers and thrift store jacket, but I stood tall. When Lily walked onto that stage, something remarkable happened. She didn't just dance, she told a story with her body, her face, her every movement. You could hear the intake of breath in the audience as she twirled across the floor, like she belonged there, like she was born for it. I cried. I didn't even try to hide it. Afterward, as she ran into my arms beaming with relief, I whispered in her ear, "I've never been prouder in my life." We didn't know yet if she'd been chosen, and honestly, it didn't matter. She had danced through pain, doubt, and fear, and come out stronger. That night I wrote about her, about courage in small bodies, about grace under pressure, about how sometimes the things we think will break us are the very things that rebuild us. 2 days later, the email came. Lily had been selected for the next round. She screamed, I laughed. We danced in the living room barefoot and offbeat to the music of a better future. Life still wasn't perfect. I still worried about bills. I still worked late shifts. But something was different now. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were moving forward. We were finally moving forward. Lily had made it to the next round of auditions, and for the first time in years, I felt like our little family had found a rhythm that worked. My early mornings of writing her late afternoons of ballet together, we were rebuilding something real, something hopeful. And then life reminded us that healing isn't always a straight line. It happened on a Tuesday. Lily was practicing in the living room like she always did. I was folding laundry on the couch, half watching, half lost in thought, when I heard the sound. Not the music, not her footsteps, but something else. A short, sharp cry. I looked up in time to see her crumple to the floor, clutching her ankle. "Mommy," she gasped, tears already filling her eyes. I rushed to her heart, pounding. Her foot was twisted slightly, and even before I touched it, I knew something wasn't right. At the emergency room, the doctor confirmed it. A moderate sprain, maybe worse. They'd need to run more tests, but one thing was clear. No dancing. Not for a while. Lily was quiet the whole way home. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stared out the window, her leg wrapped in bandages, her world unraveling in silence. I tried to stay strong for her, told her we'd get through it. That rest was important, that even the best dancers needed to pause sometimes. But deep down, I was terrified, not just about her foot, but about what this might do to her spirit. The next morning, she refused to go to school. She said she was tired, that her stomach hurt. I knew it was more than that. Over the next week, she became withdrawn. Her smile faded. She stopped asking to play music. She didn't want to FaceTime her friends. At night, I'd hear her crying softly into her pillow. One evening, I found her ballet shoes stuffed into the back of her closet. "I'm never going to dance again," she whispered, not looking at me. I knelt down beside her. "Don't say that. It's true. If I miss the next audition, they'll forget about me. I'm not special anymore." It broke me to hear that I hugged her tight and said the only thing I could. "You are special, Lily. Not because you dance, but because of who you are. Your heart, your courage, your kindness. Dancing is something you love, but it doesn't define you." She didn't respond, but I could feel the tears soak through my shirt. The days passed slowly. I tried to cheer her up. Movie nights, board games, even baking, which I was terrible at. Nothing seemed to work. Then one Saturday, I remembered something from the writing group. One of the women had mentioned a free creative workshop for kids at the community center. Art, poetry, music. No pressure, just expression. I asked Lily if she'd like to go. At first, she refused, but eventually she agreed to just watch. We walked into a small room filled with paints, colored pencils, and a piano in the corner. Kids were scattered around drawing, singing, laughing. It felt warm, safe. A young woman with wild curly hair greeted us. "Welcome." "You must be Lily." Lily nodded shyly. "You can sit anywhere," she said. "You don't have to do anything you don't want. This is your space." Lily sat quietly watching the others, but after a while, she picked up a blank sheet of paper and started drawing a ballerina. Not perfect, not graceful, but strong. She returned the next week, and the week after that. Her drawings became more detailed. She even tried writing a poem. One day, she surprised me by humming a melody she'd composed in the workshop. Her light was coming back slowly, gently, not through dancing, but through discovering other parts of herself, parts that had been waiting to shine. At home, I saw her begin to move again, not rehearsing, just letting her body sway to the music, testing the waters, wending to herself. And one night, as I was cleaning the kitchen, I heard the soft tap of her pointe shoes. On the wooden floor, I turned to find her standing in the living room, one leg still slightly stiff but eyes glowing. "Do you think I can try?" she asked. "You don't have to," I said quickly. "You're still healing." "I know," she said, "but I just want to feel it again, even just for a minute." So I played her favorite ballet track. She took a deep breath and danced. It wasn't perfect. She stumbled. She winced. But her soul was in every movement. And when she finished, I clapped like it was opening night at Lincoln Center. She smiled for the first time in weeks. That night, after she went to bed, I opened my journal and wrote, "Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a girl in a bandage standing tall in her living room and reclaiming what the world tried to take." We didn't know if she'd return to competitive dancing, and that was okay. The showcase didn't matter anymore. Not compared to what she'd gained. She had discovered that her worth wasn't tied to her talent, or trophies, or applause. It was rooted in something deeper. The courage to begin again, even when it hurt. And I had learned once more that motherhood isn't just about sacrifice. It's about seeing your child clearly, helping them see themselves. It's about walking beside them, through the dark, even when you don't have a flashlight. Some nights, I still worry about the future, about money, about how many jobs I can juggle. But then I look at Lily drawing, laughing, sometimes even dancing, and I remember that we're not just rebuilding a life, we're reinventing it. A year after Lily's injury, things looked different, but not in the way I once imagined. There was no big stage, no spotlight shining on her, no final performance to prove her worth. What we had instead was quieter, smaller, but perhaps even more meaningful. Lily still danced. Not competitively, not under pressure, not in a rush to be the best, but in the living room, in art classes in her bedroom when she thought no one was watching. She moved with intention, not perfection. And to me, it was the most beautiful performance I had ever seen. I was changing too. My writing had slowly evolved into something I shared. With encouragement from the women in my community group, I submitted a personal essay to a local magazine about motherhood resilience. And starting over, I didn't expect to hear back. So when I opened my inbox one morning and saw the words, "We'd love to publish your piece," I almost dropped my coffee. It wasn't about the money, though the 2 in check felt like gold. It was the validation that my voice mattered, that the stories I carried, the quiet ones built in late-night laundromats and between grocery shifts, were worth telling. That same week, Lily brought home a note from school. Mother-daughter talent night. Sign up now. I laughed when I first saw it. "We don't really have a talent," I joked. But Lily's eyes lit up. "Yes, we do." She said, "You right." "I dance. Let's do something together." I wanted to say no. The idea of standing on a stage terrified me. I hadn't been in front of an audience since high school, but she was so excited. And deep down, I knew this wasn't about performance. It was about healing for both of us. We decided to create a spoken word and movement piece. I'd read a short story. I wrote one inspired by our journey, and Lily would interpret it through movement. Not ballet. Just free, expressive motion. We practiced at night, giggling, improvising, sometimes getting frustrated. But we never quit. The night of the performance, the small auditorium at her school buzzed with nervous families and excited kids. We waited backstage, holding hands. "You nervous?" I whispered. "A little," she admitted, but mostly happy. When our names were called, we stepped into the soft light. I took a deep breath and began reading. There was a woman who thought survival was enough. But then life whispered, "What if you lived?" She worked. She worried she wore herself thin, until her daughter reminded her that joy isn't earned. It's created. As I read, Lily danced beside me, spinning, swaying, stretching her arms wide to the world. People watched in silence, some with tears in their eyes. And in that moment, I wasn't tired. I wasn't broken. I was whole. When we finished, there was a long pause, and then the room erupted into applause. But the most powerful moment came afterward, when an older woman approached us in the hallway. She held my hand and said, "You told my story. Thank you." I realized then that our journey, though personal, was not unique. There were so many women like me, so many children like Lily, all fighting invisible battles, all trying to rebuild from scratch. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a community storytelling event. I almost turned it down, but Lily told me, "You always say we should be brave. Maybe this is your moment." So I did it. I stood up in front of strangers and told them about love, betrayal, courage, and second chances. And something incredible happened. People listened, not just politely, but deeply. Some cried, some laughed, some came up to hug me afterward. One man said, "You gave words to something I've been carrying for years." The truth is, We all carry things, memories, regrets, hopes, scars. Some are visible, most are not. And sometimes telling our story is the first step toward letting go of the weight. Meanwhile, Lily had found her balance again. Not just physically, but emotionally. She still had hard days. We both did, but we were no longer stuck in survival mode. She explored music, tried painting, even took up storytelling like me. I could see a quiet confidence blooming inside her, rooted not in achievement, but in self-awareness. Mark reached out a few times over the year. He wanted to be involved again, claimed he had changed. Maybe he had. I didn't know, but I made it clear. Lily's well-being came first. We took it slow, carefully. I no longer hoped for a reunion, or even closure. I just wanted peace for me, and especially for her. We talked openly now. About everything, about trust, about pain, about the strength it takes to forgive, but also the wisdom to protect your boundaries. These weren't easy lessons, but they were real. One evening, while we were cooking together, Lily turned to me and said, "You know what I love most about us?" "What's that?" I asked. "We're not perfect, but we always try." That stayed with me because she was right. Life hadn't turned out the way I planned, but in many ways it turned out better, not easier, but richer, more honest. I was no longer the woman who did everything in silence. Hoping someone would notice, I spoke up now. I asked for help. I shared what I learned. And I allowed myself to celebrate even the smallest of victories. And Lily, she wasn't just my daughter. She was my teacher, my mirror, my hope. Today, when I look back at that rainy afternoon outside the ballet studio, when my heart shattered in silence, I no longer see it as the end of something. I see it as the moment everything began to change, because sometimes the most painful truths are the ones that finally set us free. And sometimes a broken woman and a little girl in ballet shoes can rebuild an entire life. One story, one step, one brave choice at a time. Did this story make you see a part of yourself? If it did, don't forget to leave a comment, to share your thoughts, and most importantly, subscribe to Family Story, my husband, so you can hear more heartfelt family stories every week. Marriage isn't just a journey, it's a long story, and you are our companion on every page.